Who's handling coffee duties today? Okay. All right. No problem. I'm a couple A person is a renter in a field, meaning that he pays a certain price and gets to work in the field and take all of the fruits and the crops from the field in return for whatever amount he's paying. That's called a chocher. So he's referred to as a mekabel. He takes upon himself that he's going to be on the field and pay a certain amount. If he took it upon himself with shavua echad, for one shemitah cycle, b'sheva me'ozuz, and he's going to pay $700 hashvius min. So he only gets to stay in the field for 7 years, including the shemitah year, despite the fact that he won't be able to work the field during shemitah or get the crops. But nonetheless, a deal is a deal. He's only on the field for 7 years. He has to pay the full 700 zuz price. However, if he takes upon himself to work the field and pay a certain amount for 7 years, for 700 zuz, $700, whatever, then we don't count the Shemitah year because it means 7 productive years. It means 7 years that he'll be allowed to work the field. So therefore, effectively, he'll stay on the field for 8 years. Okay, Schir Yom, if a person is a daytime worker, go bekol alayla, so he finishes his work at the end of the day, and that means the employer has the entire night to pay him. Schir Laila, if he's a nighttime worker, that means that he works the entire night until the crack of dawn, so then the employer has the entire day to pay him. Go bekol yom. Schir Shos, if he only works for a number of hours and he finishes either in the middle of the day or the middle of the night, then kol alayla v'kol yom. So the go back then he can collect. The employer has the right to pay him for the rest of the night or the entire rest of the day. There's a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel exactly how to understand that. We'll see in the Gemara. Sechir Shabbos, Sechir Chodesh, Sechir Shana, Sechir Shavua. If a person is hired to work for a week or for a month or for a year or for a 7-year cycle, so he finishes his work and now it's time for him to get paid. So if he finished during the daytime, yatsa b'yom, go b'kol yom. So that means the employer has the obligation to pay him before the end of the day. Yatsa b'layla, if he finishes working in the middle of the night, then go b'kol layla b'kol yom. So then the employer has the right to pay him the rest of the night or the following day. That's what it sounds like. We'll see in the Gemara that Rab is going to reinterpret that last statement. Why would the nighttime be different from the day? If your worker finishes working in the middle of the day, so then the employer has to pay him before the end of the day. But if he finishes working in the middle of the night, the employer can pay him either the rest of that night or the following day. So if you hold that way, which is in fact the interpretation of Shmuel, it would be based on the idea that the prohibition of delaying the payment of a worker is based on a couple of psukim. But for a worker who was working, let's say in the daytime and is supposed to get paid at night, it says lo salim pulas tachir itchad boker. There's a violation of lina that you can't allow the wages to be left overnight. So Tosa says that it's possible that lina is interpreted as meaning that it has to be the entire night. So if it's only a portion of the night that there wasn't payment, so that doesn't constitute lo salin. So that's why if the worker finished working in the middle of the night, the employer would have the right to pay the entire next day. But we don't paskin that way. But that would be the explanation according to the simple reading of the Mishnah. Okay, Gemara. We paskin if the worker finishes working in the middle of the night, so then the employer is obligated to pay the worker before the end of the night, before the crack of dawn. So when we married off my oldest son in Brooklyn, I remember in the Brooklyn Hall, so there was somebody that was hired to be like a singer during the chuppah. And he came to me after the chuppah was over, and he hadn't gotten paid his wages. He was like a last minute addition, so he said that's whatever it was, a few $100s. So I didn't have enough cash to pay him at the time, but I told my wife we have to PayPal or Zelle him the money before the end of the night because otherwise we'll be in violation of this halacha. So it was like midnight. I said we got it till at 2 a.m. We zelled him the money. Okay. The end of the night is the crack of dawn. So if a person, let's say a person finishes working at midnight, so he has to be paid before the crack of dawn. Yeah, Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan, Minayin l'safa yom shegava kol halayla. How do we know that a daytime worker can be paid the entire night, and only if he wasn't paid during the entire night is there a violation? Talmud Lomer There's a pasuk in Vayikra. There's one pasuk in a series of. There's one pasuk in Vayikra. Then there are a couple of psukim in Devarim. So it says in Vayikra, Tamaloma lo salim pulas sakir itka ad boker. That if you had a worker, let's say, who worked during the end until the end of the day, you can't have his wages delayed until past the following morning. I mean, I in the how do we know a nighttime worker gets paid the entire next day? That would be a legitimate time to pay him, but not more than that. Shenema biyomos yitain skaro. That's the pasuk in Devarim that it says you have to pay during the daytime. That must be talking about a nighttime worker. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the daytime worker gets paid in the day and the nighttime worker gets paid at night. No. We have a principle that when a person works for you, the time that the wages are owing is when they finish. So the daytime worker finishes at the very end of the day. So obviously you don't have to pay him during the daytime, you pay him at night, but you have the entire night, and vice versa. Tana Abanan.
The simple understanding is that you have until the entire night until the crack of dawn.
Correct. That's right. That's for a daytime worker. Daytime worker, you have to pay him at night because he finished working at the very end of the day. He finished work at the end of the day. When he finished working, so the night began. The night began. So the pasuk tells you they have the entire night to pay him. So it says that's the pasuk in Vayikra that you shouldn't let the wages remain overnight. I already know that that you can't it can't wait and pass the night. So that means that you have to pay him by the morning. So my tamaloma ad boker. So why does it say until the morning? Obviously, if you have to pay him sometime at night, it means up until the morning. So malami she'eno el ad boker rishon. It means that the violation of losalin is only the very first day. Afterwards, you're doing the wrong thing by delaying the payment of his wages, but you're not violating the Issa Daraisa every day. But then what do you violate? So what happens if you don't pay your worker the next day and the next day and the next day? So Amarav, you're over on an Issa Darabanan, Mishum Bal Tisha, that there is a pasuk in Mishlei that says you shouldn't delay payments of a worker. So that applies for every single moment that you delay your wages after the first day. So Amarav Yosef, my Kara, what's the pasuk? It says in Mishlei, you shouldn't say to your fellow who worked for you, oh, come back, I'll pay you later, and I'll pay you tomorrow, I'll pay you on Tuesday, whatever. And you have the wages to pay him right now. If you have the wages to pay him now, you have to pay him right away. That's an Issa D'Rabbanan, so that continues. No, let's say I don't have the money. If I don't have the money, I'm not able to pay. So if I knew that I wouldn't be able to pay, I shouldn't have hired her in the first place. But if I thought I'd be able to pay, and then some misfortune occurred, and the money had to be spent on something else, so then I don't violate the Isser. If I don't have the money available right away, then I just have to pay him as soon as I get the money. But I should do my utmost to get the money as soon as I can. If Reuven tells Shimon, I want you to hire workers for me, so Shneim ain't over Mishum Batalin. So then, if Reuben didn't pay the workers right after they finished, the first night after they finished, the first day after they finished, he doesn't violate the prohibition, and Shimon, who hired the workers for him, doesn't violate the prohibition. Reuben doesn't violate it because he wasn't the one who hired them directly. Shimon doesn't violate it because he's not the one who's the employer. So if Shimon said that your wages are my responsibility, then it's his responsibility. Because we have a advice that says if you hire a worker to do in your field, but you show the worker to do the work in Shimon's field, no, so it doesn't matter. Reuven, who hired the worker, still bears the full responsibility, even though he hired him to work for somebody else. And then Reuven can collect from Shimon with the amount that he paid the worker to do the work for Shimon. Now, so the amount that Shimon benefited, but still Reuven's responsibility. So why isn't it Shimon's here responsibility since he's the one who did the hiring? So we say, no, that's because in this case, Shimon is saying to the workers explicitly, it's not my responsibility, that the responsibility is on Reuven. But Reuven is not the one who did the hiring. So therefore, Reuven also does not violate the Isra if he didn't pay on time. So Yudah Bar Meremer would do this. Amalei Shmai, he would say to his assistant, go and hire workers for me. So he wouldn't do it himself. Said, tell the workers that it's my responsibility. So you're not saying it's your responsibility, and I'm not the one hiring them. So therefore, neither of us are going to violate the prohibition. So Tosa says it wasn't because he was looking to get out of paying his workers on time. He was just afraid that maybe he'd be distracted, he would forget, something would come up, so he wanted to avoid accidentally violating the prohibition. Meremer Umar Zutra Agri La Dadi. And Meremer Umar Zutra, they had a deal whenever they needed to hire workers, they would get their friend. Meremer would get Marzutra would get Meremer to hire the workers so that they would not inadvertently violate the prohibition. And the rabbinic prohibition is only violated if you do it on purpose. So Amar Rabba Baravuna, Hani Shukai Desura. He says those workers in the marketplace of Sua, so the workers know that there's a market day that everybody makes all their money and they're not going to get paid until that day. Since the workers know, it's like the Moichel, they know that the wages don't get paid until the money comes in from the big marketplace activity. They know that the marketplace workers are not going to get their money until the big day of the fair, whenever that occurs. But in terms of the rabbinic prohibition of putting off a payment especially if you have available funds, so that they would still violate, even though, despite the fact that the biblical violation would not be violated. So he said that an hourly worker who finishes in the middle of the day, at the middle of the night, so he can collect the entire night and the entire day. So Rav says what the din is. Rav says how we paskin. We paskin that if the worker finishes in the middle of the day, let's say he finishes 10 minutes before Shkia, so I have to pay him in the next 10 minutes. If I don't pay him in the next 10 minutes, I violate a biblical violation. That's a very serious thing. People don't know this halacha. It's a very important halacha. Same thing with a nighttime worker. He finishes at 4 in the morning. I better pay him before 6 in the morning, whenever dawn is. Shmuel says no. We read the Mishnah the way it sounds. Scare shows the Yom to go Yom. You're right about a daytime worker. You have to pay him before the end of the day if he finishes in the middle of the day. But when it comes to a nighttime worker who finishes in the middle of the night, scare shows go Yom. So so the employer has the right to pay him the rest of the night and the entire following day, because it's not lo solin, it's not lean if it's not the entire night. That's Shmuel's opinion. So the Mishnah seems to support Shmuel. It says so you have to do that. That seems to be a kasha and Rav. It says he can collect the entire night and then the next day. So I'm let's start in. So Rav says you have to read the Mishnah that it's talking about two different cases. The studying tani scare shows the yom kol yom. It means that if he was a daytime work, he finished in the middle of the day, you got to pay him before the end of the day. Scare shows light kol. So nighttime work, you have to pay him before the end of the night. Tanan, what about the end of the Mishnah? The end of the Mishnah talks about workers who work for long periods of time. Scare Shabbos worked for weeks, chodesh, a month, shana, years, shavua, the entire shemitah cycle. Yotzev yom kol yom. If he finished in the day, he collects the entire day. Yotzev layla kol yom. He finished the night, so the employer can pay him that night or the following day. It sounds like Shmuel. Someone like Rav, you're right. So Rav says the end of the Mishnah does sound like Shmuel. So fine, that's a Tana who disagrees with me, but I hold like a different Tana. Tonight, there's a Tana who holds like me. The Tanya is there's a price that says scare shows the yom kol yom. If he's a daytime work, he finishes in the middle of the day, he can collect the entire day. He collects the rest of the day. Scare shows laila kol laila. Doesn't say kol laila kol yom. If he's a nighttime work, he finishes in the middle of the night, like this chuppah singer. So the wedding singer has to get paid before the end of the night. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. So I says I hold like Rabbi Yehuda. Different Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon, okay, Rabbi Shimon is like Shmuel. Rabbi Shimon only scare shows the yom to go kol yom. If he works during the daytime, he collects the entire day. Scare shows laila. If he finished the night, go kol laila kol yom. Then the employer can pay him until the end of the next day. So from all of this, all these halachos, we learn the following: if you withhold the wages of a worker, you violate 5 lavin, behei shemos, you over behei shemos, ve'esei, and ve'esei halalu, and 1 positive commandment. 5 negative commandments and 1 positive commandment. What are the negative commandments? What's the positive commandment? Number 1, mishum ba'al tashok es reacha. So this is a pasuk in Vayikra. Lo sashok es reacha v'lo sigzo, that you violated lo sashok. Mishum lo, that you withheld wages. Mishum lo sigzo, and also it says v'lo sigzo. It's considered stealing from the employee if you didn't pay him on time. Mishum ba'al sashok, and also there's a pasuk in Devarim that says lo sashok sakir ani v'evyon. Sakir lo sashok sakir ani. Mishum ba'al tolin, and also the pasuk says in Vayikra lo salin pulas yitkar boker. Umishum, and the positive commandment which appears in the pasuk in Devarim, B'yomo sitei tzacharo, that you're obligated to pay the wages during the day if he was a nighttime worker. Umishum, and then the last negative commandment which appears in that very same pasuk in Devarim is lo savo alav hashemesh, that you have to pay him before the sun sets. If he was a nighttime worker, so you have to pay him before the sun sets. So honey dika b'yama leka b'leilia dika leila leka b'yamama. So you say, wait a second, but the pasuk in Vayikra was talking about a daytime worker who has to be paid at night. The pasuk in Devarim is talking about a nighttime worker who has to be paid during the day. So the violation for a daytime worker doesn't apply to a nighttime worker. The violation for a nighttime worker doesn't apply to a daytime worker. So how can you say a person always violates 5 labin in one essay? So how can the same shame skivus bialma? It means that there are 5 different potential negative prohibitions. That's the simple reading of the Gemara. Not that the person violates them all at once. With daytime work, he violates one set of Isurim. With nighttime work, he violates a different set of Isurim. Others say no. It means that it's still, since it all relates to not paying a worker on time, he violates all these. Okay. Esu oshik ve'esu gezel. What's considered to be oshik? We say lo sashik. What's considered to be lo sigzo? So if you say like oshik, you say to the worker, I'm going to pay you, but come back, I don't have the wages now, but you really do. That's considered to be oshik. You say to the worker, I have the money to pay you, but I'm not going to pay you. Ha ha ha. Zeo gezel. So that's clearly stealing. You say, I'm not going to pay you ever. That's gezel. So ask him about Sheshis. So Sheshis says no, but we have we have some sort of a tradition. Brisa. It says Ezu Oshik Shechiva Alav Torah Korban. What's the Oshik? The Torah says that you have to pay a Korban. It's a pasuk in Vayikra. Nefesh Kisecha to Mala Mal Bashem. That you have to pay. You have to bring some sort of a Korban for not for stealing or not paying wages on time. So the Torah indicates it says should be dumya de pikadon. It says v'chichesh b'amiso b'pikadon or b'susumes yad or b'gazel or ashakas amiso. And such a person has to bring a korban. The kakafale mamona has to be where the person is denying paying money. So if the case is where the worker comes to you and you just say, "Oh, come back later and I'll pay you." That's not oshik because you're not denying anything. Elam Rav Sheshes, so Sheshes says oshik is a denial. And Sativ Lach say oshik. If you say to the worker, "I already paid you," I admit I was supposed to pay you, but I claim that I already paid you. That's oshik because it's a denial. The case of Gezel is the straightforward case. Gezel, where you say, I have the money, but I'm not going to pay you, that's Gezel. So Abai says the Gezel appears in the same pasuk. It says, O begazel, O ashaka samiso. Ezu Gezel shkiva lav Torah. So when the Torah says that you violate Gezel, it's also talking about we're going to have to bring a korban, and that means there was some sort of a kfira in that case too. Ezu Gezel, who Gezel shkiva lav Torah korban, doing the pikadon binan. It says, Oh, v'gazel or shaka samiso. It's got kafale mamona, so it has to be also a kafira. Not that I have the money, I'm not going to pay you. There has to be some sort of a kafira. Elam Abaye says that it works like this. If I say I never hired you, I don't know what you're talking about. You never worked for me, so that's considered to be oshik. It's a denial, but you're not saying, oh, you worked for me. And then I'm claiming that I paid you, even though I didn't pay you. But it's Sativ block. I say I work for you, so then that's already acknowledgement of Gezel of some sort. I say you did work for me, but I'm going to claim that I gave it to you. So Zeo Gezel, that's Gezel. Rosheshes, why was it Rav Rosheshes had to reconstrue the Osha case, but he didn't feel the need to reconstrue the Gezel case? They're in the same pasuk, indicating that that you bring a korban and there has to be some sort of a denial of some sort. So why did he only change the scenario of the Osha case? So Rosheshes mashna Oshik b'kashle mashna Gezel lo kashle. So Amalek, he says no, but you look at the wording of the pasuk. Gezel the Gazli b'had kafe. Gezel is a case where he stole from the person and then he denies having stole from him. So therefore, he can say it's a regular case of Gezel, and then he denies afterwards what he did. So why didn't I say the same thing by Yoshik? That he didn't pay the person and then he denies that happened. Just say it's a regular case of Oshik, where the person says that, oh, I'm going to pay you later, I'm going to pay you later, and he never pays him, then he's kofir the whole thing. So we say, no, no, the case of Oshik, it has to be a denial at the time. Where the person says, "Oh, I already paid you." The person says, "Oh, I never hired you," right? Or something, something like that. So what that was the case that Rav Shesha says, "Oh, I already paid you." What was Oshik? So Hakiyash the Bishlam Mahasam Ksiva Obegazel. There's the case of Gezel. Sounds like there was Gezel. We call the Odile Meikara. That originally he did something and he admitted that he owed him the money, but he said, I'm going to steal the money from you. So that's, I'm not going to pay you. So that's the case of Gezel. And then afterwards he denies it. About Gabi Oshik, Miksiva Obe Oshik. However, when it says Oshik, it doesn't say, oh, the Oshik already occurred. It says, oh, Ashaksid. It doesn't say be oshik like it says bigazo, bigazo. It says oh ashaka samiso, that it's one case. Sha'ashko kvar, that this is the case that's occurring. So that case that's occurring must be a case where the person says, oh, I already paid you. So that must be the oshik case. So Rabba Amar Zeu Oshik Zeu Gezel. Rabba says that oshik and gezel are exactly the same thing. But lama chokana kasub lavo la b'shnei lavin. And why is it that the pasuk gives you two different labin? That it says ashak, where it says lo sa'ashok velo sigzo, that's even though it's the same thing that you're basically refusing to pay the worker, we're still calling it by two different lavin in order that you will be liable for two different violations of negative prohibitions. The next mission, Maslisin, echad schar adam, echad schar behema.
You have to get follow principle.
No, because it's the lav that's corrected by paying money. It's a nitan letashlumin. Echad schar adam, echad schar behema. If you the violation applies whether you hire a person or whether you hire the person's animal, or you hire or you rented the person's objects, their utensils, and now you didn't pay on time. You have to pay, or the prohibition applies to all these cases. But all these violations only kick in if the worker actually asks for his wages. Now, it could be that he's kind of milling around and not saying anything, he's embarrassed to open up his mouth. That also counts. But it has to be that he expresses a desire to collect his wages in some fashion. If he doesn't ask for his wages right away, so then you don't violate the prohibition. Similarly, if you say to the worker, listen, I owe you $50, so go to Jewel, and I arrange with Jewel that they'll give you $50 worth of groceries. Or go to Sarah's tent and I arrange that they'll give you $50 worth of your food for Shabbos. So then, so then as long as that arrangement has been made, the worker, the employer does not violate the prohibition. You go to Shulchani, the money changer will have money for you. If the person was a worker, now let's say he was a daytime worker, he wants to collect at night, nighttime worker wants to collect during the day. He says he wasn't paid yet, so we believe him. He makes a shvua and he collects. But if it's past the time that he was supposed to be paid, so at that point we assume that the employer already paid him. So then we don't allow him to just take a shvua and collect his wages. We assume that the employer is telling the truth if he says he already paid him. And if there, however, were witnesses who say that he asked for the money from the Baal Bais and Baal Bais didn't pay him right away, so then even if it's after the time that he was supposed to get paid, he can still take a shvua at least the next day and collect his wages. Even if the person is not Jewish, they're a ger toshav and they work for you, so there's still a violation if you don't pay him on time. But that's only the positive commandment of that applies to a ger toshav, but the negative commandment of lo salin does not apply to a non-Jewish worker who's a ger toshav. The Rambam says not only a ger toshav, but even a regular non-Jew, the halakha of biyamos iten schal would apply to a regular non-Jew as well. I think the Sefer Chinuch assumes the same way, and therefore one has to be very makni with non-Jewish workers. The Gemara says, "Mani maslis lo Tanakama." So the Mishnah, our Mishnah, is not going like the Tanakama de Meichicha, lo Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. It's not going like Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. It's going like a third opinion. We'll see. Our Mishnah goes like Rabbi Yishmael. What are the opinions of the Tanakama and Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda? The Tanya in the Brisa says, next page, Meichicha palacher. Says the pasuk says me'achecha lo sashok sachir ani b'avyon me'achecha. So that means that at least the negative prohibition does not apply to non-Jews. Gerucha, it does apply. It says omi gerucha. So ger tzedek, a person is a sincere convert who converted to Judaism. The prohibition applies to him. Bisharecha, you might say, since the pasuk says me'achecha, it has to be somebody who was always your brother from his birth. Say no, it says gerucha, even a ger. Bisharecha, so it says even even a person who's in your gates, who's a non-Jew, but he's somebody who took upon himself the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, he's a ger toshav, so he would also be included according to the Tanakhama in the prohibition. How do we know any other sachar adam? And so I know that this is true if you hire a person. How do I know you violate the prohibition if you hire a person's animal, the utensils, you rent them out and you didn't, and now the rental period is over, you have to pay right away. Whatever work is done within your land, it could be the person, it could be the person's utensils, you have to pay on time. Or whether I'm talking about a behema, whether I'm talking about kalim, whether I'm talking about a ger toshav, you would violate all of these negative prohibitions and the positive commandment as well. You violate all the prohibitions in Vayikra, the prohibitions in Devarim, the positive commandment, you violate everything. So Yosef, that's not like our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that with the ger toshav, you only violate the positive commandment, not the negative commandment. So we know that our Mishnah is not like the Tanakhama. What does Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, ger toshav yesh b'mishum yom sitin schavim b'mishum zabaltan. A ger toshav, you only violate the positive commandment, not the negative commandment. Okay, that's like our Mishnah. What about behema v'kelim? Behema v'kelim, amen mishum ba'al tashuk v'bad. When it comes to Behemoth Vekalim, you only violate the prohibition of Baal Tashok, where it says Losa Ashok Sachir Aniva Evyon. That's the only violation that you have with respect to Behemoth Vekalim, because that's the pasuk where it says Asher Be'artzecha. So money, so the Tanakama, so our mission can't be like the Tanakama, the Mechecha of this brisa, because Kasha Ger Tosha, because he says that that with a Ger Tosha you violate all the negative prohibitions. But our mission says only the positive commandment. Rabbi Yossi Kasha Rabbi Yossi says when it comes to renting out Behemoth Vekalim, you only violate the pasuk in Devarim, Losashok Sachir Ani Vevyon, but not the pasuk in Vayikra. So Amar so Kasha Behemoth Vekalim. And our Mishnah says that you violate all of the prohibitions with respect to the rental of Behemoth Vekalim. So Amar Rabbi Haitana, so our Mishnah is going like Rabbi Yishmael. Tana the Rabbi Yishmael. The Tana the Rabbi Yishmael. Echad Schar Adam, Echad Schar Behemoth, Echad Schar Kalim. Yeshua Mishum Yomo Sitin Schar. He says that when it comes to renting out an animal or kalim, you violate the positive commandment umishum lo salin, and you violate all the negative commandments as well. Ger toshav yeshua mishum yomo sitin schal. But on the other hand, when it comes to a ger toshav, you only violate the positive commandment of yomo sitin schal and not the negative commandment. And that's like our Mishnah. So my time with the Tanakama. What's the reason for the Tanakama who says that you violate everything for everything? That you violate, even for a ger toshav, you violate everything. My time with the Tanakama, the Mechecha. So he says, because I have Xera Shava. It says in Devarim, Lo Sashok Sachir, Aniva Evyon, and it says in Vayikra, Lo Sashok Esrecha, Lo Tikso, Lo Stalim Pulat Sachir, Itchad Boker, I have Xera Shava, Sachir. So whatever it's, whatever prohibitions apply from Devarim would apply to Vayikra as well. So we know that there are prohibitions that apply with respect to a ger toshav. When it comes to biomo, when it comes the way he drives anyway, bisharecha in Devarim includes a ger toshav, so all of those prohibitions would apply to all the psukim by Yikra as well. So my Tanakam mechecha gama sacher. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yudah, gama sacher. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yudah, however, does not derive the gezerah shava. So nehidlo gama sacher behema bekalim, and that's why he says that behema bekalim. If you don't pay on time, it's only a violation of Asher Be'artzecha, which is the pasuk in Devarim. But why then does Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda say that with respect to ger, with respect to Bishum Yomo Sitei Schar and Amin Nechayev? So he says Nidlo Gama Sacher Behema Bekalim. So he doesn't derive the Sacher, but nonetheless, why shouldn't you violate at least Biyomo Sitain Secharo is the pasuk that is in Devarim. So Nami Nechayev. So you should violate Biyomo. You should violate Biyomo Sitain Secharo based on with respect to Ger Toshav. Nami Nechayev. So Rabbi Chanina. So Rabbi Chanina says Amakra below Savo Alav Hashemesh Ki Anihu. He says that no. It says with respect to, I'm sorry, when it comes to behema v'kalim, you should at least violate b'yom sidin scharo. So he says that no, it's not true, because the pasuk says kianihu, because he's a poor person. Mishain ba'in l'de'anius v'ashivus. So b'yom sidin scharo, which is the pasuk in Devarim, only applies with respect to somebody who can either become an ani or an asher. Yatsu behema v'kalim she'enim ba'in l'de'anius v'ashivus. But behema v'kalim, they can't become poor. Only a human being can become poor. We don't say that an animal or kalim become poor. So therefore, that's why Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda would distinguish, and he would say that's why behema v'kalim is only subject to the pasuk or those sashak sakir ani v'evyon in Devarim, and not to the violation of biyomo sitein sakaro. That simply does not encompass behema v'kalim. So v'tanakama haiki anihu my avilei. What does the Tanakama do with aniki anihu? He says the pasuk in Devarim biyomo sitein sakaro does apply to behema v'kalim based on the gzeva shava sakir. Right, but it says that it has to be somebody who can something that can become poor. So he says no, that's just to teach me precedence. Hami by the aktim ani lashir. That's to teach me that if I have two workers, one is poor and one is rich, so then I should pay the poor worker before I pay the rich worker. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, how we lo sashak sakir ani Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda says no, but I can derive that from the fact that the pasuk in Devarim already says lo sashok sakir ani be'evyon, that the ani comes first. The Tanakama says no. The fact that an ani comes first, that I need two psukim. One to teach me that he comes before an evyon, and evyon means somebody is even more indigent than the ani, and also another pasuk that he comes before the usher. Tanakama chad lahaktim ani le'ashiv, chad lahaktim ani le'evyon. That I need to teach both principles. Yashmin an evyon, to teach me that an ani comes before an evyon. That's because somebody who's really in dire poverty. Evyon means somebody who's in dire poverty. Somebody's in dire poverty, so they're not embarrassed to ask for their wages. Mishun lo kasu the mitveh. So a regular poor person who's not in dire poverty might be embarrassed to ask for his wages. So that's why the Torah tells you have to pay him first. But the evyon, you don't have to worry; he's going to ask for his wages. Well, ashir the kasu mitveh emolo. But I might think that that when it comes to a rich person who is actually embarrassed to ask for his wages, so maybe a poor person wouldn't come before a rich person. So that's why I have to say ani bevyon. The yashmin and ashir and it would have said simply that an ani comes before an ashir, because the rich person doesn't need the wages as much as a poor person. But a person who's really in dire straits, who needs the money even more than an ani, so I might think that he takes precedence. So that's why I need both psukim. That's why I need both psukim. So therefore, I don't have a pasuk left over to teach me that biyomo sitain skaro only applies to human beings. No, it would apply even to behema and kalim as well. Metana dida manavshak. And our Tana too. That's Rabbi Yishmael. So Rabbi Yishmael, so Manashach, if he holds by the Gzera Shabbat, so then why does he say that the negative commandments do not apply to a Ger Toshav? Apil Ger Toshav Nami. Yolo lo Yaliv Sakir Sakir. If he doesn't know by Sakir Sakir, so Behema V'Kelim Minale. So then how does he know that the violations that are described in Devarim would apply to Behema V'Kelim? There it says Ani. So maybe it's only something that become an ani, minale. So we say in reality, he doesn't learn from the Gzera Shabbat, and that's why behema kalim are not subject to all the and that's and that's why ger toshav is not subject to all of the prohibitions. However, when it says with respect to behema v'kalim, the reason why he extends the prohibition to behema v'kalim even in the psukim in Devarim, where it doesn't say Asher B'Yartzecha, because there's another pasuk in Devarim. In Devarim it says V'lo Salin Hula Sachir Itcha Ad Boker. So there's I'm sorry. The pasuk in Devarim says Asher B'Yartzecha. What about the pasuk in Vayikra? The pasuk in Vayikra says V'lo Salin Hula Sachir Itcha Ad Boker. So that indicates that anything which is itcha, any wages that you still that are still outstanding, you're obligated to pay, even if it relates to Behema V'Kelim. So therefore, it applies not only to the pasuk in Devarim or Shebe'atzka, but even to the pasukim in Vayikra. And that's why I know that the prohibitions of Behema V'Kelim apply both to the violations in Devarim as well as to the violations in Vayikra. So if that's the case, why don't I say itcha? That with you includes the ger toshav, and therefore the negative prohibition should also apply to a ger toshav. Why does our Tana say that only the positive prohibition applies to a ger toshav? So we say no, because amakra, because of the fact that the Torah says reacha, it says lo sashok is reacha below sigzol, reacha below ger toshav. We see that the negative prohibition only applies to your fellow and not to a non-Jew. So if that's the case, so why don't I say reacha means my fellow and not animals? So no, haksiv because it says anything which is with you. So why am I including from itzcha behema v'kelim ulahotzi, and then from reacha I'm excluding ger toshav? Why don't I do the other way around? So say no, mistaber behema v'kelim the rabbis. Behema v'kelim I should include shken yeshem klam amon reacha, because that's included within the money that belongs to your fellow. And it says that you shouldn't hold up. You shouldn't hold up the money that's owing to your fellow. So ger toshav and mamon reacha. Ger toshav is a person, and therefore is not included within mamon reacha. So I'm going to include more in terms of items that I have to pay for than people that I have to pay in terms of the gzeras hakosov. The Tanakama that we have at the beginning of this Amud, who basically said that everybody is included in everything, right? Ger Toshav is included in everything, and the Behema V'Kelim is included in everything. So hi reacha mayav delay. So what is excluded then from the word reacha? It's reacha. I'm not excluding Ger Toshav from anything, and I'm not excluding Behema V'Kelim from anything. So how many by the Tanya? So that's to teach me. No, it is to exclude a non-Jew. Reacha lo Amaleki. Amaleki means a non-Jew. So what do you mean? I already excluded a non-Jew. I had me'achecha prat la'acherim. That was the pasuk in Devarim that said that asher los ashok sakir ani me'avyon me'achecha below prat la'acherim means not non-Jews. So me'achecha nafka. So chad l'mishra oshka v'chad l'mishra gozlo. So this is to teach me, no, that when it comes to a non-Jew, you can you don't have a violation for withholding wages, and you don't have a violation for stealing. We don't pass in this way, but this is according to that Tanakama, there'd be no violation of gezel with respect to a non-Jew. With Srichet, I have to teach me both Kiddushim. That to teach me that you're not allowed to steal from him. Okay, I understand. Because stealing, so whatever he has, he didn't necessarily work hard for whatever's in his possession. But maybe he inherited it. But if this person actually worked for you and did work and labored on your behalf, so then it's more of a chiddush to say you don't have to pay him. So I might think that there would be a prohibition. Yes, but an oshko, and if I say it's a prohibition for not paying somebody who worked for you and labored for you, mishum the other. So I might think the thing is only a prohibition in that case because it's not already in his hands. About gazela, which is something which is already in his hands, the other day that already came to his hands, even if it wasn't for working for you. So amalo, so I might think that's more of a prohibition. So that's why tzrika, that's why I need both. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Hailo Salim Pulu Saki with God Bokim Mayovidle. What is Rabbi Yehuda, what is Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda do with the pasuk of Lo Salin? That because the our Tana learns that we include Behema and Kalim from this, but Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda does not include Behema and Kalim in the pasuk of Lo Saling Sacher Yitzchak Boker. He only learns it from the pasuk in Devarim, but he doesn't learn it from the pasuk in Vayikra. And even even in Devarim B'Yomo Sitain Scharo, he says is not something which is applicable when it comes to behema, when it comes to behema v'kelim, as we learned earlier on. So what does he do with itcha? That would seem to include everything that's itcha, which should really be behema v'kelim as well. So in by the Rav Asi. So from that he derives the halacha of Rav Asi. What's the halacha of Rav Asi? The halacha of Rav Asi is as follows. He says that to teach you that even if you hired somebody for only a teeny tiny little job, anything which is itcha, you hired a worker only to cut like one cluster of grapes, and you didn't hire him like for even an hour, just hired him to do like one tiny little thing for 2 seconds, you still would violate Baltalin if you don't pay him on time. The Ida and the other Tana would say, no, I don't need itcha to teach me that. Itcha teaches me behema v'kelim. I don't need Itzchak to teach me, even if I hired him for a little bit, because that I derive from the words in the pasuk that says "Ve'elav who knows say es nafsho." That this is the pasuk in Devarim. Ve'elav who knows say es nafsho. Ve'elav who knows say es nafsho nafka. Davar moser nafsho alav. That anything that he gives his life for, because if he's even going to cut one cluster of grapes, he has to go into the vineyard. He has to go and hover over the various the vines and the various poles and so forth, and he's putting himself in danger. So anything he puts himself in danger for, even if it's only a teeny little bit. Coming by the Tanya, Rabbi Yosef would say, no, Ve'elav knows it's nafsho, I derive the following thing, which is Ve'elav knows it's nafsho. Why is it that he's hanging over the various poles and trees and vines? That he's doing it for his wages, and therefore you have to take it seriously. It's teaching you a mussar lesson. It also teaches you this as if you're killing him. If you don't pay a worker on time, it's as if you're killing him. It's as if you have and that's why it says teach me that mussar lesson, but not to teach me per se this idea that even if he's only going to cut one cluster of grapes, that I'm going to learn from the word itcha. Okay, we'll stop here. Okay. Okay, have a great day. Okay.
Thank you for hearing me.
Oh, okay, you're very welcome.
I still got this. I told you.
Okay.
I told you the other